Talk is open for questions, of course.
I have a question regarding the frequencies on page 11, number 34. I'm just, so my worry here is that B to B, I guess it's a more complex, the salutation change is more complex than the B to B change. But look at the numbers, you have 11% of the people fail here in the experiment to acquire the B2B change, but only 4% the B2B change. And since you later pay so much attention to that, it's almost a factor 3, the difference in the unexpected direction, I find. I mean, just for the basic change that they were supposed to learn. So I'm wondering what you have to say about this difference.
The only thing that I can suggest, and this is just on the spur of the moment, B to V is so hard to hear that maybe some of the training data were misperceived, so they got less evidence for B to V. I take notes. You have to be patient. Why lower?
I want to understand how the Starmap constraints work. So going to the tableau in 25 for Macedonian. So could we say that the Starmap constraint that is critical to this analysis, the Starmap P2 beta, is a conjunction of two standard faithfulness constraints, ident continuant and ident voice, and that to get Macedonian, the conjoint constraint has to be ranked below the Martinez constraint, whereas the simple version, ident continuant, is to be marked above it.
Both the analysis that you gave and the, by the way, I give you a great deal of credit for arguing against your own theory.
It's not mine.
It's a very,
very
principled,
very
the foolish application of your ideas. Okay, well now it becomes a much harder question. Golly.
Because you do.
Look, let me try to, the way to duck questions is to generalize them, right? What is the right metric to assess phonological similarity? Now, in some cases, we are going to get qualitatively the very same result if we count features than if we do behavioral experiments on people. And I suspect that in this limited domain, P, B, V, or beta, you are going to get the same results. But I think the writing on the wall in terms of current research is definitely pointing in the direction of real concrete phonetic distance.
Sure, but then let's talk cues, not complete segments. So
okay, but okay. Let me finally give the one little bit of honest answer. You can retreat to the big picture. The small picture here is the result about FV being different from BV. Okay, so that emerges from the model. Those are both one feature differences. So that would be the bit of better empirical fit that you obtain here using the phonetic distance metric.
So can I restate what my
Please.
question was, these constraints need to be generalized at first point of articulation. To generalize them at first point of articulation, we need to state exactly what it is that differentiates both from data in a general way.
Yeah.
So I wasn't addressing the question of whether we need to talk about features or cues.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about how we generalize the constraints to be true of a variety of points of articulation, and whether indeed it is necessary to go to Starmap, as opposed to conjunctions of standard constraints, whether stated on features or on fields.
I see. So what you have in mind is a conjoined, a faithfulness constraint conjoined for
Another
two.
faithfulness constraint.
Right. In the present case, there are notational variants. Zora's work on infixation, less so, because they're actually referring to strings and contexts. If, as I would like to imagine but cannot bring to fruition, Starmap is actually the key to a complete theory of opacity, then you're going to have rather more intricate Starmap constraints that could not be translated into conjoined constraints. Does that get at your question better?
I'm now dreaming up different conjunctions of different constraints, but yes, I understand.
Okay.
I was just wondering if, where you did the experiment. So there was an experiment 3, and I guess the question was when you say a control experiment, was experiment 4 where you trained on the B's and saw whether people confused the P's? So there should have been a converse, just like experiments 1 and 2 were related, there should have been a 3 and 4, and 4 should have been the counterpart.
Yes, how long did my talk last?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
So
compressing.
you said a control experiment, was that the experiment?
Yeah, I'm going to have to refer you to the dissertation for that. I can't keep it all in my head.
Because it would seem
Yeah.
useful to make sure that, I'm not trying to remember how that went. You gave them, you gave them both sets of forms, right? And they still blundered on the B's to D's, right? That was experiment 3.
Yeah.
So there ought to be one where you give them, where you reverse which one goes to B, where the B goes to B and the P stays the same, right?
Agreed.
And now you give them all the forms and see if they blunder on the P's, and that should be less than they blundered on the B's.
Yeah.
Should be 2% instead of 20 or something.
Yes, I think so.
Right.
Oh, that's right.
I don't know
Yeah.
if that was done.
I can't remember.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, your point is totally.
Right.
I was wondering if I could ask the next question of the relation between artificial grammar learning experiments and language acquisition by children and typology. And if I understood the presentation correctly, you show very clearly that the performance of adults in confusion experiments successfully predicts the avoidance by adults in artificial grammar learning experiments of
Yes.
saltation.
Yeah.
That's what the argument shows. But of course, if you go to back to the first part of your experiment, you see that there is another potential causal factor in explaining the typological rarity of saltation in the languages of the world, which is the complexity of the chain of diachronic events that brings about saltation.
Yeah.
And of course, unless we know to what extent the performance of adults in artificial grammar learning experiments matches the performance of children in learning alternations, we don't know exactly how heavy is the relative causal role of the complexity of the diachronic chain and the bias. And I was wondering if you had any ideas on how to address that question.
Yes. I think in the present case, sort of the gold standard would be a trip to Sardinia, watching little tykes and see what mistakes they make. There's something really tantalizing in Bolognese. He says, adults every once in a while substitute a beta for B, just like Jamie's experimental subjects. Unfortunately, he says that happens really rarely. It would be nice to plant microphones on appropriately aged Campanians for a long time and get a really massive corpus and so on and so forth. Campanian is headed for extinction. And so maybe there's some little child being brought up by her grandmother who could be observed. It's a long shot at this point. The thing that Jamie did that is maybe kind of the next best thing was that, we have an infant lab in our department now under Megha Sundra, who's his other dissertation chair. And they did I cannot remember exactly the details right now, but it's going to be in the dissertation. They did a saltation experiment on 1-year-old infants, and they have a positive result there. It's coming out in infancy. So that is the next best thing, and the data look encouraging. Obviously, we want to spend a lot of time on this issue of whether the artificial language learning experiments yield results that will make sense applied to real languages. But I would say so far, the result, these experiments are I don't know if they're a fad or a scientific revolution, but there's a lot of them happening. And on the whole, I feel kind of encouraged by how much the results we're getting do look like adult languages.
I wonder if the accent approach to saltation makes some different predictions from the rule-based approach. And specifically, so a rule for saltation will predict that we'll get saltation in some specific context, let's say for a suffix. What you're doing with reweighting the Starmap constraints is kind of more tantamount to warping the perceptual space for the whole language. And I wonder if that wouldn't have ramifications for any other phenomena in the language that draw on these similarity judgments, like other morphological contexts, rhyme or alliteration, and so on.
You mean like would we want to see the same? Oh, I see what you mean. Because P is alternating with beta, good grief, would Campanian speakers somehow feel that pa-va is a better alliteration than ba-va?
Don't you predict that? Is the question.
No. Having thought about it, look, this is the grammar. This is the morphophonemics. This is plausibly an output constraint on phonological alternation. It is the speakers confronted with bizarre data that they had to learn from when they were kids, grudgingly ranking the Starmap constraints in a way that is counter to the PMAP. But those Starmap constraints, like all faithfulness constraints, have little subscripts on them, I-O, O-O. And certainly my intuition, I don't know about yours, is that they probably alliterate like any other proper Germanic tribe, right, using the PMAP itself. The re-ranking, learners are conservative. So the re-ranking would have to be conservative. You get weird alternations, so you re-rank for alternations, but you don't start, it's not a warping of. What is warped is the constraints in the grammar, not the PMAP itself. But it's an interesting.
And you have other constraints than accessing the PMAP and still sort of not.
That's certainly my intuition about what you would find. Yeah.
So I have sort of a relative retarded question, but it might not be obvious at the start. So I was looking at experiment 1 and thinking, so in fact, this language has another analysis available, and it would be completely not science, very natural. And this would be an analysis in which the language has final obstruent devoicing, so that you can't have the B in the final position, and an inventory constraint against non-strident fricatives. So basically, you want to devoice the B and get it to the end. And so I was thinking, okay, so evidently the subjects didn't learn it as this language, and this makes some sense. I mean, they are English speakers, and maybe you're not really changing their inventories too much in the lab. But such a language could exist by a combination of historical facts that would give you these two processes independently. So I guess what I'm wondering is, well, for one thing, kind of highlighting the risk that these artificial grammar experiments may be a somewhat different situation is actually stronger support for the for some kind of learning bias than you suggest, because it seems pretty plausible. This is sort of a Tarskian point. It seems quite plausible that these things should arise quite a bit through historical change, and we should see many more such cases, like the language.
Wow. So that your proposed analysis, talab is from underlying talab.
Is from talab is from underlying talab.
Talab.
With
Oh, with final
devoicing and
devoicing hardening.
yeah.
And so you got. I'm skeptical because, unlike you, I feel that isolation forms are likely to be privileged as base forms. But I'm not sure I can, other than stating that prejudice to you, I'm not sure. It just seems so fancy to me. They have so little data, couldn't they just
So
be
the
relatively.
case was a different idea about what is driving them away from that knowledge.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
No more questions?
Can I just follow up
Oh.
on this
Yeah,
question?
yeah.
So suppose there happened to be another alternation between P and V that also applied to B somewhere else in the language. Would that be possible or unlikely given the way the map has been warped?
Ah. Let's think this through. That's right. If we had a second Lanishan environment, do you have any suggestions for a second Lanishan? Intervocalic is certainly the one that always pops to
But
mind.
if there were, yeah, never mind.
Well, a new intervocalic one could arise
sign
from
would-
the loss of something.
Right, right. Okay.
You could just throw a new one in your artificial grammar experiment and see this.
Right.
Or some particular affix that had an effect.
I'm going to do the same odious thing with your question, which is to duck it by generalizing. Because it's actually a very interesting thing about OT. The big selling point for OT at the beginning and over time has been it gives us this account of conspiracies, right? We've got a highly ranked markedness constraint, and that constraint is satisfied by all sorts of different changes in the language. And the generality that achieved was felt to be essentially a solution to the conspiracy problem and was a major element in the adoption of the theory. What you have suggested is the mirror image. We've got a faithfulness constraint that is low ranked. And that means that the fix that corresponds to that faithfulness constraint ought to be the fix for a number of different phonotactic problems. I have always looked for some name for this, like could you call it Spincuracy or something like that. Whatever you call it, my sense is that Spincuracies are harder to find than conspiracies. That, the prediction is that there should be something that is malleable, and it is malleable for lots of different reasons. And I'm not sure how well that is supported. The force of your question, of course, takes it even further. There should be not only Spincuracies, but there should be unnatural Spincuracies as a perverse demotion of a faithfulness constraint leads to a whole flock of perverse phenomena. And yeah,
Well, that's the way it works out.
yeah. But given that it's a little bit hard to find Spincuracies in the first place, that's
So
why
you might be lucky.
I might be lucky, yeah, or unfortunate. It would be nice to make the test, absolutely.
Okay, I think then it looks like we do have no more questions, so I'm going to suggest that we, after thanking the speaker right warmly,